The Raw after WrestleMania kicks off with the Roar Oba Femi in a massive ovation, obviously, from the T-Mobile Arena. The guy looks like $1 million in a suit. And just like Roman Reigns did at WrestleMania 33 when he beat The Undertaker and he came out to boos, obviously, this is the opposite. Oba coming out to cheers. But all Roman said was, "This is my yard now." Five simple words. All Obafemi said was, and got a massive pop, "The roar is here." Which indicates to you that not only is he going to be on the Monday Night Raw brand, which we'll talk about the addition to the Monday Night Raw brand, in front of that SmackDown better get some new additions because Raw's roster right now is blowing SmackDowns out of the water, especially with a full-time World Heavyweight Champion in the OTC, the Tribal Chief. But they're making it very clear that this guy Obafemi is indeed the next big thing. And I do think we are going to get a coronation of him this year at SummerSlam in Minneapolis. But then we get Rhea Ripley and Io Sky. They defeat the Kabuki Warriors. Io Sky wins clean with the over-the-top moonsault. And we saw backstage later in the night Rhea and Io saying goodbye to each other, which as a tag team, with Rhea being the Women's World Champion and then feuding with the Kabuki Warriors for months, I say thank goodness to that. We did see a cool moment where Liv Morgan is sort of sitting on an equipment case and she says, "Hey, Rhea, I'll see you down the road." I could really see in Saudi Arabia this year, maybe you do Rhea Ripley. Excuse me, maybe you do Rhea Ripley versus Liv Morgan, Crown Jewel, the Women's World Champion versus the WWE Women's Champion. I mean, it's possible. I've already said, though, I don't know. I think Liv Morgan's going to go into eventual feud with Raquel Rodriguez and Roxanne Perez over the true leader of the Judgment Day. Winner of the night, Sol Ruka, makes her Monday Night Raw debut coming up from NXT. And I do want to point this out. And since they announced that Joe Hendry is now also part of Monday Night Raw, say his name when he appears, Mr. Joe Hendry, that everybody that wrestled on John Cena's Saturday Night's main event, outside of Leon Slater, who was in TNA, and AJ Styles, who retired. You have Oba Femi, you have Dragon Lee, I'll even throw in there being on the Raw roster, Javon Evans, Bailey, Sol Ruka, you know, Obafemi, obviously. Everybody that wrestled on that show, outside of Cody Rhodes now, is on the Raw roster. Cody's obviously on SmackDown. We'll get to the Cody CM Punk promo in a minute. But I think it's really cool that, John Cena's goal for that Saturday night's main event on December 13th, 2025 was to showcase the future of WWE. I think WWE picked talent that were television ready, that were about ready to come up to the main roster. And that's what we got. And it's really cool to see that influx of talent. Soul and Liv really had a good match as well. It was a good preview of what's to come. I actually want to see that feud down the road. Sorry, I attacked Soul as they get ready for their final match tonight on NXT. But that Soul Snatcher is over. And it's going to get over, in my opinion, very quickly on the main roster. I see Soul Ruka being a star. Maybe she goes after Becky Lynch, who's going to be there next week, and the Women's Intercontinental Championship. We got Ethan Page being called up, which I think is really cool. Him and Javon Evans had a really good match. Ethan Page gets over after Rusev attacked Javon Evans, created the distraction, and it tries to come down for the save. Rusev not only attacks Javon Evans, but he attacks Penta as well. Maybe we get a triple threat match. Obviously, Rusev blames Javon Evans for costing him the IC championship with that OG cutter, with that leaping cutter from the rope to the ladder in Sunday's ladder match. And the interesting thing is, throughout this show, I was thinking, okay, we got an Obafemi promo where he said four words. We've got the return of Ethan Page. Okay. We got the debut of Sol Ruka, so we got a couple of debuts. They announced that Joe Hendry is coming to the roster, and I said, okay. Finn Balor beat JD McDonough in an okay match. Finn Balor, it's the coup de grace queen. Obviously, Dominic Mysterio attacks him from behind. I said post WrestleMania that, Dominic's going to face Finn Balor because he didn't sign a contract to face the Demon. He signed a contract to face Finn Balor, so I get that. Um, from that perspective, though, there wasn't a huge moment, right? It didn't really feel like there was a, oh my God, Raw after WrestleMania moment outside of Sol Ruka. And then we got two interesting moments. We have the moment where CM Punk comes down to the ring, and just like at WrestleMania, he says, it's clobbering time. And then Cult of Personality plays, which is really interesting. I'll see, obviously, if they want to keep that in full time for the Second City Saint. But Phil comes down to the ring, and this is where the promo really turns because he cuts an emotional promo about all of these losses, from WWE backstage personnel that he's dealt with since the beginning of the year, and his dog Larry passed away, and he lost last night to Roman Reigns, but that he wasn't going to cry like a little bee, that he's going to work his way back, and that sometimes a title opportunity just drops from the sky, and who comes out? Who do you know rather than the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes himself, sporting that shiner from when Randy Orton knocked him out during the night one main event of WrestleMania? And basically, Punk says, Cody, what are you doing out here? I lost, you won. And Cody basically tells Punk that he's not a loser and that anytime he wants a title shot, to come call. And I think, they are obviously building this. They built the tension over the past couple of years between CM Punk and Cody Rhodes. There's a lot of rumors out there. Maybe they go that direction for SummerSlam. Listen, I think if you're doing the long term planning here, there's a shot that they save this all the way to next year WrestleMania. I see a scenario where um, I think you could do something where next year you could have CM Punk win the Royal Rumble for the first time. And instead of challenging a guy like Obafemi, he goes after Cody Rhodes. And maybe this is where Punk leans a little bit into his heel side. They could obviously reference the fact they were both in AEW together. But, Punk can talk about how Cody was the golden boy and he felt like he was the golden boy. And you can sort of lean into that CM Punk jealousy a little bit of Cody Rhodes, and I think that would be a marquee match for WrestleMania next year in Saudi Arabia. The two top guys, since they really have both returned, along with Roman Reigns in WWE, the two most popular baby faces, along with Roman Reigns in WWE, finally face off. And, if Obafemi's going to be champion, I think Obafemi Gunther is right there on the marquee. I don't know what you would do with Roman Reigns, whether it's The Rock, whether it's Seth Rollins, but think about those three matches right there: Obafemi Gunther, Punk and Rhodes, Roman Rock, or Roman Rollins. One of those matches would not main event. And, we end the segment backstage where Paul Heyman says, and tells Gunther that he does owe him a favor. Gunther later backstage says he owes him a big favor. I still think that Gunther Brock Lesnar is going to be the direction they go at SummerSlam. And that's why I don't think you can do Cody Punk at SummerSlam, because if Gunther and Lesnar is your direction at SummerSlam, and Punk and, or excuse me, Roman Reigns and Obafemi is your direction at SummerSlam, and then Io Sky and Rhea Ripley is your direction at SummerSlam, where Rhea Ripley tries to beat Io Sky for the first time for a championship. One of those matches is already not main eventing. Forget throwing Punk and Cody Rhodes in there. So, and then we had a return of the Street Profits, which I loved. Angelo Dawkins, Montez Ford both look ripped. They helped Seth Rollins take out the Vision. I think it's great the Street Profits are coming back. They're right in the World Tag Team Championship picture. They definitely provided a media boost to a Raw Tag Team division that needs it. And now, in my opinion, Seth Rollins can now focus on Braun Breaker. I like the fact that Paul Heyman got right back to Vision work. Then we get to the main event, and we got all the feels in the world. Roman Reigns back with the old OTC theme song, holding up the World Heavyweight Championship alongside his cousins, the Usos, and Roman Reigns telling them that he doesn't like this BS we've been on the last 2 years, where him and the Usos have not been on the same page. That yes, he is the tribal chief, that he is the champion again, but this time is different. There's no Solo. There's no Paul Heyman. He's not being a tyrant leader of the bloodline. He just wants his family together. And that's when Jacob Fatu comes out and he essentially says, hey man, listen, I'm done with Drew McIntyre now, right? We just finished an epic street fight at WrestleMania Saturday. Roman, I'm not here to take the head of the table, right? I'm not that guy. You are. But what I do want is I want your shoes, I want your private jets, I want more money for my family, I want luxury things. In order to have that, I gotta have the World Heavyweight Championship, and I challenge you to a match at Backlash. And Roman said, let me think about it, little cousin, because if I beat you, which I'm going to, it's gonna send you back on a momentum that's going to derail you. And I think Jacob is coming in as more serious. I don't think this necessarily is a heel turn yet for Jacob Fatu. I think if Fatu were to lose to Roman Reigns at Backlash, that's when you can slowly build up the heel turn for Jacob Fatu. But if Jacob Fatu is going to be on Raw, and Joe Hendry is going to be on Raw, and Sol Ruka is going to be on Raw, and Ethan Page is going to be on Raw, and Oba Femi is now officially a member of the Raw roster. Where does that leave SmackDown? Well, Rhea Ripley's going over there. We talked about some of the challengers she has to fight. That doesn't mean everybody. I'm hoping some, specifically on the women's side. I'm hoping they boost it with 3 or 4 women. Julia needs some challengers for the United States Championship. Um, obviously Rhea needs some eventual challengers for the Women's World Championship. I think Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton feud, if I had to guess, is continuing for the summer, and it's going to go all the way to SummerSlam. So I think the main title scene is sort of covered over there. You have a United States Championship feud, which I think Trick Williams, Ilya Dragunov, Sami Zayn, Carmelo Hayes, even The Miz, you can sort of interchange there. I think the tag team division, you know, now that the um Wyatt Six and MFTs no longer have the gold. It's being held by Damian Priest and R-Truth right now. Maybe you do something with the Motor City Machine Guns. Maybe you do something with Los Garzas. I would love for the LWO as a tag team to maybe turn heel, even though Rey Mysterio is on the red brand. I think that SmackDown needs more tag teams, and I think that SmackDown needs to build up its women's division. That's where I'm at right now. Again, I thought it was a good Raw at WrestleMania. I didn't think it was the best of all time. I didn't think it had those oh my god moments, but that Jacob Fatu promo segment was giving me all the feels at the end of the show because everything Roman Reigns does is everything. And I thought this show did a good job of teasing things for the future. And I've said this before. Next week, I believe on Thursday, I'm going to come out with my booking SummerSlam 2026 card. You will get SummerSlam 2026, and there are about 5 or 6 main events that could go on this card that's going to be on this show. And in Minneapolis, who they were screwed out of WrestleMania multiple times, the same way New Orleans was, it looks like to me WWE is making up for it with SummerSlam because as they were expected to get WrestleMania 41, then it went to Las Vegas. This SummerSlam card on paper has the chance to be one of the best of all time. Like that clip from the Brand's World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brand's World podcast right here on YouTube.